Recently, I was watching the show The Boys, and one of the many themes that it covers was essentially realpolitik, or how powerful people manipulate certain events to advance their own agendas, how they play different sides of politics, and how they engage in these power struggles and power plays. Once again, like I said, to advance their own agenda, to advance their own end. And of course, this, in the context of the Boys show, takes place in a fictional world where there are superheroes. And one thing I will say is that The Boys does a good job in presenting a realistic picture of how superheroes would actually be like. Instead of them being pure good or pure evil, these superheroes are deeply flawed human beings with their own traumas and insecurities that push and advance their own agendas depending on if it benefits them or not, and they engage in this kind of deep state power struggles, and they are very much part and parcel of this elitist culture. And that brings to mind the fact that there is a kind of game, a game of nations, you could call it, or a game between the elites. And this game that they play is one which oftentimes gets innocent people caught up in it, and innocent people end up losing their lives or suffering. But the elites, let's say, or those in power, are the ones who benefit from certain conspiracies, let's say, or certain power plays, as we were to say, or power games. And it's a concept that is commonly obviously understood as game theory, where these people in power, let's say, or these elites, they are very much rational actors. And some may say, well, if they are so malevolent, if they are so evil, why don't they just take over everything and just make their power obvious? But you see, that's actually a mistake, because the elites aren't necessarily pure evil or pure good. This isn't like a fictional Marvel movie where everybody has some kind of clear cut goal that they want to achieve. Conditions change, circumstances change, and let's say the elites, they want to maintain their power, their resources. They might not necessarily be purely evil, but they are, let's say, evil or greedy or lustful for power to the extent that they are very much human like the rest of us. But the reality then is that these desires of theirs get the better of them. Think about it. They have grown up all their lives in these powerful circles, in a position of power, and they want to maintain those positions and they want to advance those positions. So the most rational thing for them to do in a societal context is to discreetly make moves and discreetly plan things which will allow them to gain more power. There's an interesting concept that has to be mentioned here, which is that the Quranic text asserts that the life of this world is but play and amusement. That إِنَّمَا الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا لَعِبٌ وَلَهْوٌ, that the life of this world is mere play and amusement. And one of the interpretations that you could take is a sociological and political interpretation. For example, we can take Goffman's dramaturgical model, where we as people are acting out certain roles through our lives. It's like we are on a stage and we are putting on different masks and playing out certain parts. And if we were to project that onto a larger scale, what we would realize is that these corporations, these big systems, are playing their roles in society just like the rest of us are. But for them, it's a game of power, it's a game of privilege, it's a game of status and resources. And you may say, well, why don't they just take everything over? But first of all, where's the fun in that, in a very twisted kind of way? But second of all, why waste your resources in trying to dominate the whole planet when you can be discreet about it, control things from behind the scenes, and work on things that will further advance your own power? And so that is the kind of game that is often played. Now, saying the elites as a class often views them as one homogenous group, and this is also a mistake, because the reality is that there are different groups and different individuals that make up the elite class, and they have different interests of their own. There are cases where the elites as a collective whole play out certain conspiracies, or different groups of the elites conspire in certain schemes and plots. And these often come at the cost of the common people who are collateral damage for these schemes. But then there are also times and places where the elites make schemes against each other because they may be in competition and want to out one another in a certain status or a certain resource that they desire. And this often results in one group of elites or an elitist falling from grace, whilst another group benefits at their expense. Then there are, of course, those things which all the elites benefit from. But for example, let's say, two groups of elites were to have a competition between each other and scheme against each other. This can also serve as a form of damage control and essentially manufacturing a narrative that prevents people from going after all those groups that are responsible for their suffering. So for example, there is a crime, let's say there is mass trafficking, there is, let's say, mass human trafficking or mass drug smuggling, something like that, and there's a whole circle. What may happen is that the more powerful of the elites may decide to out some of the lesser members of the elite class, so that the whole of the elite class as a collective whole is protected from broader scrutiny from the whole of society. Essentially scapegoat one of the elites or one group of the elites, and the rest of them will avoid accountability. These are the kinds of things that often do play out within politics, within circles of power, within big corporations where money and power lies. And the mistake that a lot of people who operate within the establishment narrative, or at the very least they aren't critical of the establishment at all, is they ignore the reality of this kind of Machiavellian realpolitik. And this has been the case throughout history. However, it's also the case that great men have rallied the masses for the cause of justice. Oftentimes, well-meaning people have to engage in such a political system, and oftentimes even these well-meaning people fall victim to using such dubious means to further advance their politics, let's say, or their agenda. And so an issue does come up where even those who are well-meaning and even those who don't mean very well at all and just want to maintain their power, they're both engaging very much in the same means, in the same political game. And that makes it difficult then to actually distinguish, especially for the common people, who is in the right and who is in the wrong. But the point is that there are cases throughout history where well-meaning leaders have brought about much desired and needed change in the world for the better. And the mistake that anti-establishment defeatists, what I would call them, often make is that they ignore that we can bring about change in the world. Yes, this whole realpolitik game, it's a very brutal, Machiavellian, and oftentimes cruel and immoral kind of game, but it is one that we have to play regardless. Society as a whole is not simply purely good or purely evil. Most of society operates very much within a morally grey area where things are very obscure and dubious. And yet we still have to operate within it. Otherwise, we are admitting defeat and we are preventing ourselves from bringing about change in the world. So whilst we should hold the people in power accountable, and we should do our best to not engage in such a brutal political game, we have to also acknowledge the reality of human society and see that such a realpolitik game, let's say, or this game of nations, the game of the elites, the game of the politically and financially powerful, is just another part of the great stage of human life and human society. And it is a game that some of us, especially those who are going in politics, are going to have to play. A nuanced and mature understanding of the crimes of the politicians, the crimes of the elites, and not simply labeling everything as a conspiracy theory, and acknowledging that even a lot of conspiracy theories can have an element of truth to them, whilst acknowledging the very human aspects of such politics and the very real human aspects of the impacts of these things in society and their broader implications, is necessary to actually effectively understand politics both historically and contemporarily, and also not to fall victim to certain generalizing, unnuanced narratives.